Well, hey everybody, thanks for stopping back into the Red Barn. If you saw the last episode, you'll know that we got the turn downs tacked on the sides of the intake plenum. And this time, I think it's gonna be chase down, continued mods to this thing, tidy up the backside, but I also wanna get started on prettying up this engine lid, see what kind of style points we can add to this thing. Hey, before we get started on continued work with the Ferrari manifold, I wanted to give you an update on this concept of the corner radiators. While I think it's possible, well, it is possible, it's a ton of work to the chassis, and I think it's too high risk. And really, the reason I was going after doing that was because I didn't think I was going to have much of a trunk. And given the changes to the plenum, I am going to go with the standard. I'm going to chicken out, and I'm going to go with the standard, center radiator, kind of like with the LS car. Got a couple of ideas for maybe shrouding it to keep a little bit of the trunk space, but with all the storage space we're going to end up back here, I am abandoning that idea for simplicity's sake. Okay, let's talk design options. Remember that this whole intake manifold has been turned 180 degrees. So this surface used to be at the front, and that's why this dimension of this trim job is where it is, because when this was turned around 180 degrees, the plenum started diving away right about here, and this looked pretty cool. Unfortunately, it doesn't look so cool anymore, because as you can see, these original openings are going to get cut off and reshaped, so the whole backside of the plenum will have this shape to it, just an oval or a rounded corner. So this won't be quite as dramatically far back, but the fact that this covers it, obviously it doesn't look right. So the very first thing I'm going to try to do is I'm going to trim this opening back to about here and just see what that looks like. So I know for sure I want this opened up more. The tricky part is going to be, what do we do in here? And a couple options are, as we've talked about, just doing a bump up, and forget that this is a horrible cardboard, kind of a thing, but imagine that there was almost like a reverse hood scoop sort of a deal. Whoops, that's backwards. But forget exactly what this looks like, but if there was a bit of a bump up here, you can see based on what's going on, well, you might not be able to see it, but I need clearance here for the engine to move. So, this may need to be out about this far, but I think that could be made to look okay. So that's one option. The other option is, or another option is, if you look at, we Sharpied a black line here that's at a slight arc, and that arc is far enough inboard here to give the clearance to the engine movement that we need around the turn down and the throttle body, but not so dramatically curved that it draws your eye to it, because 914s have a couple of definitive straight lines that are sort of iconic to their design, this engine lid being part of that. Obviously with a giant hole cut in the middle of it and a Ferrari engine poking out, things like that may be off the table. But if we can do something subtle that maybe is one of those things you aren't quite sure what happened, so maybe a very slight curve here can work, and I think I can justify that. This was Martin's idea, but I was pointing out to him, every time he said, well, what about a curve? I'm like, I hate, curves on 914s is, maybe questionable. But then when you're sitting right here, the roof does the exact same thing. So maybe we can say, well, we're just trying to echo that design cue. So there's a couple things to try out first. This is going to be the first one. Well, what a difference a little trimming makes. It makes everything look much bigger, right? Look how much more that is exposed. Yeah, and now you can also see the fun of asymmetric, cylinder offset. If you look across there, I got this much gap to that cut, and on that side, half as much. But such is V8-ness. But what this also starts to give is, without this piece coming way over this, the motor can go up and down. I mean, I think I might be able to get away with just trimming this under piece, because I've got nothing but room inboard of this. And if I just reinforce this, the engine lid farther inboard to keep the floppy from happening, I might be able to just trim this back a little bit more and call it done. I might not need a bump up. unless I want, you know, the grill would bump up. I think that would have to happen, but I really like that. I think that looks good. That makes a huge difference right there. Of course, the real bad news is now this thing's a complete noodle. So I think the next thing that has to happen is I got to get clearance here so that I can reinforce, you know, really understand what dimensional space I have to make this strong. So lots of things to figure out, but now let's go to work. Let's go back to work on the plenum and get that shaped more better. All right, and not that that's definitive, because I still have to, you know, this part's going to be on right here, but you can see what a difference that makes. Or you can see, this is the lid pushed all the way up, and you can see that whole corner, this whole piece will be gone. And you can see that means I can probably go back to a full-size deck lid at the base where I had trimmed away just to get this rough cut in here. So that's good. And as I mentioned, well, that may be, well, that'll be gone, right? So this will actually be clear. That side will be well clear. So I might be good with just a trimmed deck lid. But that gives you a better idea of how it's going to fit. Plus, now it doesn't hit anything, even in test mode. And then with the deck lid on, you can see another issue to keep top of mind is however wide that gets trimmed, that's how wide the trunk has to get trimmed, right? This needs to be a consistent opening. And you can see here, I went a little wide, wider than I needed. So progress, keep going. All right, now it's going to be to get rid of where the turn downs originally went. And Martin's back today. Good. And if you're wondering why Martin's here, Martin is great at this part of things. He's a genius with aluminum and I am not. And I have gotten comfortable with the fact that I'm good enough at enough stuff that if I'm not good enough at some things, I'm good with that. And I don't want to practice my aluminum work on something this visible. So I've enlisted Martin's help, and he's working up a pattern that we're then going to transfer onto some 3003 aluminum sheet to make up these corners. And ideally, we're gonna try to replicate this as best we can. So after much discussion, I don't know if you could pick that up in the hand gestures that were going on, but we've got the basic rough opening that we want, and what we've decided is we're going to cut this entire corner off and have the initial piece of material come up and over to the point at which this radius intersects it, leaving just kind of this open corner. Then we can bring another piece out like this. So here's how this looks. Funky piece of paper with some bends in it to account for the radii. This ends up sitting like this, and this one piece is going to account for the radius coming around the corner at the base, as well as this radius that comes up here at the top. And then you can see that's just going to mean we're going to have to make a piece here, but this is going to start to get hammered over. This will leave right at the edge of where the radius begins, and then we'll make this piece with a small hammer over on this edge and stitch that piece in there, and we'll have a patched plenum. That's our story, and we're sticking to it. So Martin has gone ahead and marked out.
So that's a bend. That's the start of a big bend,
right?
And this,
well, it starts right at the tip, right? It just starts right there.
Should be the start of the little bend,
right?
I'll use a square just to.
Okay.
And I've left it long so we can bend it over our T-dolly.
We got a T-dolly to try to form those radii, and away we go. So we're going to cut some material and start some pounding. And then after much manipulation, it was cut this piece, bend this piece, trim this piece, radius this piece, and then start doing some hammer and dolly work. It's got a couple flaws on it that'll be sanded out before it's all said and done. But then hours later, this piece fits like so. And we're about to tack this on here, and then we'll make one little corner piece, which will be tricky because it's got to have a radius, you know, slight radius this way, radius this way, little corner piece. But there we go. So there is one corner patched plenum. Well, corner patched plenum. Let's tack this thing on here. Now you know why I invite him over to do aluminum work. Lovely. All right. So that was quite a good day's work. That was, what, 4 hours? That was about 4 hours worth of work to make that pattern, cut the opening, make the pattern, tune everything, get the part, retune the opening. And then what you miss, what I tend not to film, is all of the banter between the two of us about, I'm looking at it from a different angle and I'm saying, oh, change this, and he's saying, no, it looks fine, and I'm saying, no, it doesn't, and or he'll say it's not fitting, and I'm saying, yes, it does, and we go back and forth. And I'm sure you would find that like an old married couple, but at the end of the day, it gets it done, and it is just super cool. Look at that. Now, even better is that's going to all get sanded away and wrinkle finish painted. So ideally, it'll look like it was never done in the first place. But there you go. So more later, and you know, fingers crossed we get a match on the other side. All right, now obviously, still some finish work to do, but this gives you a look at how that's going to work out. So it's got a nicely matched radius to the opening, or it will. That's pretty close. I'll have to check for sure. But now you can see as this opens up, I still may have to knock a teeny bit off just to clear this very last part of the return, but happy with that. And then you can see this one's going to have tons of room. Okay, back at it, working on this little filler piece. And the cool thing was, I love it when a plan comes together. We had the original turn down material, and in looking at the shape we were going for this outer corner radius, it's the exact same as the turn down material. So now it's just a question of trimming all this. Yeah, and then I think that's going to happen is there's just going to be a weld right here, and then that's just going to get shaped as part of the radius.
Yeah, I'm just going to bevel the edges, and then we'll go for the weld.
All right, for this piece, it's almost impossible to hold it in place, so we're going to just tack it to get it to stick, and then it's going to be fitted until we get it where we want it, and then weld it. And there's the corner piece tacked and fit. Not much to look at right now, but once it's all finished and dressed, it's going to look like it was never there in the first place. And there's the corner piece, nicely welded. Now, Martin specifically went after kind of backflowing to try to melt this weld farther outboard so we have more to work with to work that radius. And you can see, you know, when he wants to do a nice tight bead, it's a nice tight bead, but when we know we're going to be doing some shaping, it's slightly different. So, here we go. First round with the file and the DA, and you can see that other than, I mean, you can still see where the weld is colored slightly different, but that is, you cannot feel that bump at all. and we haven't gotten into here yet, and obviously with more welding. I think we were just excited to see what the finish was going to look like, so we kind of got ahead of ourselves. So anyway, back to working on the other side, but this is going to be super cool looking, don't you think? Now on this other side, we opted to take some lessons learned, and rather than doing all the cutting and then remaking the radius, we opted to do, funny how things work out, a 3-inch hole-ish. And so we're just making one piece with just a simple radius that comes around that corner. It's not going to be quite as tidy looking as this one, I don't think, but it's hidden, it's faster, and it should accomplish the exact same goal. So they're going to be slightly different, but that's not the end of the world, because as you recall from earlier, they're already slightly different in the most obvious place where you can see it. And that's some of the charm of this engine. All right, a little bit of final trimming and a little bit of beveling ahead of welding, but there's the plug for this end. It's going to be, like I said, slightly different look than the other side, but again, hardly able to see it, and it's okay because they're asymmetric anyway. So there we go. And with some of the final welding done, you can see that that's the shape of this one, and it's going to be a little different, right, because of the nature of how we solve the problem, taking this one all the way around the corner. And then this one, we just decided, wait a second, we don't need to rebuild this radius and all these radiuses. And this is, as you saw, this is just one piece that got a bend, and in it goes. It'll be interesting to see how it finishes compared to this one. This one looks, I think this one's going to look more factory, but we'll see. Once it's all tidied up, we shall see. But I think I'm going to call it good for this episode, and a lot of great progress. There's my lovely wife, Martin. Take a bow. All the great work. And I also want to re-say, when I said I invited Martin over because he's good at this part, he's good at all these parts, but mostly it's always just great to have a buddy in the shop to bounce ideas off of. And when he's a skilled craftsman and can do things that I'm not quite capable of, it's even better. So there you go. All right, so thanks for joining us. I appreciate you guys watching. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below, and we'll see y'all next time. Take care. Bye-bye.